Trust the process of relationship building. Hey ladies, welcome back. It's your man, Fearless Movement. Here's some pearls of wisdom that could have saved many marriages. Most women or wives dreams of their husband being their own man. However, many men don't understand their own process to life or to living. Today we're going to have a real conversation about trust relationships. You see, many of us believe that trust is all about the other person, but the reality is, trusting isn't about them at all. It's all about you. And I'm here to help you unpack the unrealistic expectations in relationships. Is being single really a good thing? Are you using your single status as a shield to protect you from being hurt again? If so, then you're just avoiding the deeper work to do. It's time to change your approach. Stop looking for the perfection of others and start finding clarity within yourself. The key isn't trusting someone else to be perfect. It's trusting your decisions of knowing what you want and brave enough to pursue it. So what do you want? The problem with trusting others blindly. A lot of single women get caught up thinking, if I can just meet the right person, everything will fall into place. But who's Mr. Right? And how does he act? How does he think and carry himself? You really don't know. Or his name would be better defined, such as Mr. Big Bucks, Mr. Musician, or Mr. Reverend. You get the picture. You also assume that you want trust in a relationship, but trusting a stranger to have your best interests at heart is unrealistic. It will set you up for disappointment. When you place your happiness in someone else's hands, you're handing over the keys of your emotional well-being to someone you just met. Look, we're all human, right? People make mistakes, and yes, those mistakes can sometimes feel like betrayal, but it's not always about them failing you. Often it's because we don't know what we truly want from a relationship. We trust someone who's just as lost as we are. We don't know what we want, and then we'll end up attracting the people that know as much as we do. And when two people come together not knowing the process of relationship building, the outcome is usually misunderstandings, unmet expectations, and heartache. For instance, I have a co-worker who was married twice. And him and I began to talk, and he started explaining to me the problems that he had in both marriages. Now, I'm a total stranger, remember. And he went on for days telling me crazy stories that happened in both his marriages. And he kept bringing up the fact of the things that the women were doing wrong. And it wasn't funny after a while. After 2 weeks, the humor had dried up, and I asked him, do you know what you want in a relationship with a woman? And I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It was that of a small child. He said, no, I don't. See, men want women to understand their process of living. E.W. Deming says, if you can't explain the process of what you're doing, then you don't know what you're doing. Years ago, I dated an older woman, and since I didn't know what I wanted, I could not understand or communicate my own process of life. I was focused on changing her to meet my own needs, whatever those changes were at the time. She listened to every word that came out of my mouth. And as I watched my life improve for the better, I callously and continued to badger her to no end about changing the small things about herself. In the meantime, she listened to me talk about my checkered past, the life I wanted to live, the places that I wanted to visit, and my money-making ideas. I was the envy amongst all my friends. She thought I knew what I wanted, but even through that, she made it all happen. And since I was unfocused and reliable, and technically just all over the place, over time I lost everything. I ended up in a homeless shelter, unable to figure out where I went wrong. She came into my life to do business. She understood my process of living. And part of my downfall came because I could not explain my own process, nor was I prepared to do business. See, something you must learn for yourself. Understand the hard work that it takes to build a healthy relationship, and understand your own process of living. Don't spend your time trying to find the relationships that your parents, your grandparents, or your favorite uncle and aunt had. That was their journey together, and those same rules may not apply to you. You see, ladies, it's your silent leadership that we follow. Remember Adam? Not only did Adam eat of the tree that was given to him by Eve, but he told the gods, Eve gave me the tree to eat. He wasn't ratting Eve out to the great God Almighty. He just wanted God to know, when you created or you made us a team. So, if the woman wants me to eat with her, then that's what I'm going to do. See, men want what women want. You want a stable life? We'll bend over backwards to get it for you. We cannot reach our highest goal without the presence of a woman. Your presence penetrates our fears and push us to love life just as you love us. See, the value of acceptance is this. After that relationship, I quickly jumped into, well, no, this was a totally different relationship. A couple of relationships later, I kept jumping from one relationship to another, not really understanding what I wanted and where I was going wrong. And that relationship ended just like the rest of them. It just didn't end well. And I realized that it wasn't them, I was the problem. I learned that you can't build new relationships setting ground rules and entertaining fears from past relationships. The conclusion will be met with constant adjusting your life to meet the needs of others over compromising and ultimately feeling unsatisfied and unworthy. So the question still remains, what do you want? Here's what you cannot do. You can't develop this false comfort of a checklist. What a lot of us do right after breakups is create a mental checklist for our next partner or our next date. They must have a good job, not a cheater, and non-violent, right? Check, check, check. That sounds about right. But let's be honest. Those checklists often lead us to nowhere. Why? Because they focus on external quality, which becomes a breeding ground for laziness and complacency. It is easier to find fault in others. The only checklist that should exist is your self-checklist. Your first date checklist is no more than an interview for your entertainment rather than actual compatibility. It's a way to protect yourself and keep you from being open and real and developing a real meaningful connection with future friends. So your first date interview questions. Over the years, men have gotten smart in this regard. We have armed ourselves with a plethora of airy responses and blatant lies to defend your silent judgments, eye-rolling criticisms during your interview. You want to know everything in the first date to determine if the second date is necessary. But this is called adolescent tolerance. The first date will tell you nothing about a man. He can be late, a no-show, or even, quote-unquote, forgot my wallet. A third date tells you even less. It doesn't matter how many questions you ask, you are not genuinely getting to know the other person. Remember the old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words? Which means you must study, observe, contemplate, and examine who this individual is before you make a concrete decision. Those first dates should be strictly about you. Familiarize yourself with the experience of understanding the process of being casual, being patient, present, and non-judgmental. See, communicate with no judgments and no expectations, and learn how to be in the moment and connect with the other person authentically. Yet let your time on a date flow with ease. Is the person across from you adding value to your experience, or are they reducing the experience with gossip, negativity, and complaining? Nurture the moments with laughter, information, and transparency. Find the other person interesting, whether it is with hobbies, career, or extracurricular activities. Engage in their world. Their 90-day representative will disappear and leave the person exposed, and you can see them for who they really are. Because Here, you're playing chess, not checkers. This is no longer high school. It's real life. Playing checkers as a game of life places you in a rise and fly mode, constantly having new partners and never getting to know any of them. Chess is a business model for life, where you always close the deal. So in business of living, you're playing the long game. Imagine your date as a customer and you walking into your life, i.e. your store, and you must close the deal to keep the lights on and the doors open. Who are the employees that you will bring on this date to close the deal? Is it anger, bitterness, disappointment, and fear, or wisdom, patience, focus, and drive? Remember, you're playing the long game. Now let me share something with you ladies. I don't know if you heard, but in every relationship there's a chasey and a chaser. See, the chasey has the upper hand. They're on offense. The chasey wants more of your time or more of you, and they're on defense. The person that leaves the lingering and lasting positive impression will ultimately be the chasey. So you make sure if it's you use your power for good. See, at the end of the day, a man's thought of a woman should be this. She was interesting, she was engaging, she listened, and she was very interested in me and what I want. Also, be sensual. Tease the date with a few sexy one-liners, silent flirtations with your eyes, or the way that you drink from a straw, or even walk to the bathroom. What you will experience is a shroud of arousal where you will really have piqued the individual's interest. And he'll ask to see you again, or want to continue to date elsewhere. That's where you exit the date. This is called the high note. You are now the chasee. So bring your patience. Understanding the real meaning of trusting the process. When you tell a love interest that you trust them, you are projecting your experiences and your expectations on them. You are hoping those words are a means to an end. But when they don't meet your expectations, does betrayal wash over you like a heavy rain? But now let's flip the script. Now what if instead of trusting others, you learn to trust the process of experiences that are there to serve and shape you? See, Jesus understood his process to life. He came to save a spiritually ignorant world. He gathered disciples and started his missions as a teacher and a healer. He didn't interview his disciples to see whether they had good jobs, had a little bit of money, or could carry a tree while an angry mob stood behind them yelling and screaming. If you remember, even a few disciples betrayed Jesus or denied even knowing him. And it wasn't the men who trusted, but the process he was invested in. Jesus understood his mission more than his mother, his brother, and the disciples who walked with him. So please understand that your journey is like no other person's journey. So understand your process to living is important. If you entrust a person to influence your life with what is good for you, they can only assume what you want. They don't know. And unless they know your process of living, once you know your process, you trust in your decision making and your ability to achieve. Empower yourself with the personalities that will close the deal. I walked into a shoe store looking for a pair of shoes. I was on the road going from Alabama to New Mexico. And I saw a pair of shoes online, so I went 100 miles out of my way to get to this specific store. And when I walked in, there were 3 employees standing around the cashier. So I went and stood over next to the shoes, and it took them maybe about 7 to 10 minutes to come over and help me. And I explained that I had drove a certain amount of miles to shop at their store specifically. And I asked them about the pair of shoes that I wanted, and they informed me that they didn't carry them in the store. But they seemed to be resistant, like something else was taking their attention away because only one person came over. And so I said, well, let me describe what kind of shoe I wanted and see what they would offer me. So I described the shoe, and after I did that, I got a hard stare from all the employees. I smiled and left the store immediately. And they apologized for not having the shoe as I was leaving out. I got back to my car and I shook my head in disgust. And I wanted to call the corporate office and tell them and explain that your people in your shoe store, I had explained to the people in your shoe store that I drove 100 miles to come to your store specifically, and I gave them descriptions of the kind of shoe that I wanted. And there were 2 men and 1 woman there. And no one tried to close the deal. So it's good that you have an online presence. Now, how do we get into this place? I call this the 4 principles of conscious living. How do we get into this state and we trust the process rather than putting our trust in an individual to make things what we want them to be? See, these 4 principles of conscious thinking will help you to understand your own process of life. With all the information we gather from one second to another, conscious thinking is very important to creating and living out our life's plan. Conscious living requires a foundation from which you will pull your life decisions, interactions, and establish an ironclad moral compass. And if you want to start repeating the same patterns and start attracting healthier relationships, these are spiritual insights from the life of Jesus. So the 4 principles is this. It's a value system, mental solidity, purpose, and direct communication. Now your value system, I drew from Deuteronomy 31 verse 6, which says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you, and he will never leave you nor forsake you." You see, every encounter will teach you something about you. So be studious and inquisitive, and this will serve as your compass in new relationships. Mental solidity came from Thessalonians 3:16, which says, "Now may the Lord of peace himself always give you peace in every way, and the Lord be with you all." You see, don't respond to your future with past heartbreaks. No one controls you but you. So be mentally strong and clear-headed and know what you want. The purpose comes from Psalms 34 verse 4 and 5. "I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. For those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered in shame." So that says that in a relationship, know what you want in a relationship. Is this relationship for love, companionship, growth, or something else? Make sure your purpose is definite, and your purpose is always your primary goal. And then you have direct communication. Comes from Romans 12 verse 1, and it says, "Don't conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your spirit. For you will be able to approve what God's plan is, his good and pleasing plan." So be honest, upfront, clear, and remove all expectations and judgments. And trust the process. Be a chasey. And most of all, close the deal. If you found this video to be helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, or share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this discussion together. This is the Fearless Guru. Peace.